And we're back. It's time for our NBA talk. There's only one headline that can really lead the discussion. Giannis Antetokounmpo, surprising myself and I believe many others, ended the talk about where he'll be after this season by extending his contract before the deadline with the Milwaukee Bucks, with, I believe, the most lucrative contract in NBA history.
I believe so. Just in terms of overall money, on a yearly basis, it's not the largest, but overall money, yes.
Yeah. So what was your reaction?
My first reaction, of course, as a Raptors fan was, dang it. Because that means we don't really have a shot at him anymore. And I'm sure other teams like the Dallas Mavericks, the Miami Heat, whoever else were maybe those dark horse contenders to sign him are now disappointed because that doesn't look to be the case. The next reaction I had was, even though I was disappointed, I think this is the best scenario that could have happened with Giannis signing, because of the implications it has for going against this tide of player empowerment and the big market parity worries surrounding the league. And so he showed that he was loyal and he backed it up, and I'm really impressed with his decision. What did you have any key takeaways?
Yeah, my first reaction was it was being impressed, but kind of in a different way than you were. It was more, you just don't see that a lot in this day and age of free agency. Free agents, players want to have all the cards on the table they can, and you're constantly hearing them say, like, I'm not thinking about that, I'm not thinking about that, I'm not thinking about that right now. And you don't believe it, the reporter doesn't believe it, you don't really think the player even believes it, but it's just the standard answer. You know they're thinking about it. So I'm interested that Giannis was kind of like, you know what? The best way to not think about it this next coming season is just have the deal done. I think there's a real strength in that. Now he's committed himself to this team, and now it's not about playing the best for his own sake. It's about playing the best for his team's sake. And I think that's going to be a real strength on the Milwaukee Bucks this coming season.
It also, in this era of player empowerment, it doesn't guarantee him to be stuck there for the 5 years or whatever it is. We already saw this model happen with Anthony Davis, where he took the extension from the Pelicans and then 2 years in went, okay, no, I want out, trade me. So there's still that possibility. Giannis seems less likely to do that, but he still has that flexibility given the era that he now operates in. So this is great for him to secure the bag. He's got money forever. Milwaukee could offer him the most money. He's going to make it. And then later, if they continue to not win a finals, or if he feels like they're not putting the best pieces around him, then he can force his way out, which is not the ideal situation, but he still has that flexibility, right? So it was a good decision all around for him because it's not going to hang over the team as the season goes.
Yeah, I do wonder, like, I think Kevin Durant probably stands out as the most recent example. If that trend I was talking about of players constantly having to address free agency during their last season was on his mind and had any leverage in deciding, all right, let's just get this out of the way now so I don't have to think about it this coming season.
Absolutely. And at the same time, it gets it out of the way for all the teams who may have thought they had a shot at him. So from the Raptors' perspective, you can now sit back and say, okay, we don't have to worry about finagling our cap space for this upcoming offseason. We had it all in place, but there's still going to be other free agents. We now know for sure he's not signing with us. So now it's time to activate plan B or C or Z or whatever the next phase of the development is, right? And that means this especially turns this year into a show me year for the Raptors, because it's now thinking, okay, we're not getting that Giannis to come in and put on the team, so we don't have to worry about fitting things. So now it's what culture, what identity do we want to really have for this team moving forward if we're not getting a Giannis, and who are we going to build around? if it's not him, right?
Yeah, I agree more or less completely that it's show me, and you're mainly pointing at Pascal Siakam, where it's, are we gonna build a team around this superstar, or do we have to find a superstar to put our team around?
The last important note for this signing is the fact that he's staying, and this is a huge win for not just the Bucks, but a huge win for the league, because of the recent movements of Anthony Davis and LeBron to Los Angeles and Kyrie and Kevin Durant to Brooklyn in New York, right? There was a growing worry from teams, and with the Harden wanting out to a bigger market, there's a growing worry with teams that due to the power of players, they'll want to team up and move to these larger cities.
Kawhi and Paul George as well.
Exactly. And those small markets, such as a Memphis, a New Orleans, a Milwaukee, who have drafted and developed these players, they have to be worried about losing them in 4 years because they don't want to play in a small market. So this is a huge resisting force to this movement that was expected towards moving to big markets, and it really helps to maintain parity in the league. It also means that those small markets now believe that they can hold on to these players, and Giannis is that counterexample to a Harden who's trying to force his way out. He's a counterexample of showing loyalty to a team and how much that means. And a guy like Luka Doncic, a guy like Trae Young, Zion, Ja Morant, guys like that will see that and say, okay, well, why don't I just stay with my team? And this is huge because you worry about this whole super team dynamic and the player empowerment getting what they want. So this is big for the league in terms of that.
This is kind of I'm thinking through this question as I'm asking it, but do you think it will have any relevance in how we do the GOAT conversation? Did they look out and find their super teams, or did the super team get built around them? Like, I guess the starting point for me was, this is Giannis's chance to, because everyone says this guy's ceiling is to be talked about with like LeBron and Jordan and Kobe, to potentially be one of the greatest players of all time. If he looks like he could be that kind of guy. If he can start to do that with Milwaukee, does he get extra points for having done it with Milwaukee as opposed to having gone and joined like the Raptors or the Heat and done it there?
So I think every situation is different, especially with these top tier guys, right? Like if Giannis wanted to sign somewhere else in free agency, that's completely his prerogative. And it's up to him. I think a lot of these top guys who maybe force their way out are seen in a poor light. You definitely have guys like Kobe, guys like Dirk, who stayed their entire careers with one team and they're absolutely beloved in that market. But I still wouldn't have Kobe and Dirk in the top 10 players of all time. They're in the top 20. So I think it depends, because then you look at a guy like LeBron James. Do you penalize him for going to Miami because the management was terrible in putting the right pieces around him? No. Again, it was free agency. He went where he wanted. He may have brought those guys and started this whole super team theme, but it's not a thing that hadn't happened before. So I don't think, and even then he comes back and they do have the right pieces around him and they end up winning that championship. And I think that was huge for his legacy. So there's definitely that piece where if you're with one team that whole time, that market is always going to have your back. But I think when you look at a career holistically, each one is so different that I don't think you could necessarily give a player an advantage over another because they left that team, if that team wasn't providing them with the right opportunity to succeed.
I hear what you're saying, but I still am more impressed with the guy who manages to stay with one organization and find a way to win in that organization versus the guy who goes out and just does whatever he can to get the best pieces around him. If I'm comparing the legacy of two players, the guy who, the first case, I think gets more points, because you have to, it's so hard to judge era for era that I think that is a important criteria that you can use to try and break down those time barriers.
I definitely think it's more meaningful, and especially with Dirk's case, it helped propel him because he was kind of the guy on that team. But I think objectively, I don't think you can knock a player from moving teams or staying one way or the other. It regards their situation. I think there's more meaning to winning a title in one place, but if they move, you can't discount them for the success they have in another market.
You're only discounting them relative to the guys who didn't, not saying, oh, well, he didn't do this. You're just saying, oh, well, he went and won because he and a bunch of free agents joined a super team, versus you're saying, no, he won because he just stayed and kept improving. But it's tough. You're comparing player to player and you're comparing team to team. And it's hard to compare apples and oranges while you're comparing the apples to apples and the oranges to the oranges.
Yeah.
All right. I think I've left you a little bewildered. So we'll
Yeah. Yeah, I would say Kawhi Leonard is an example of someone whose legacy is probably increased by the fact that he's had success on multiple different teams. And that actually could give him an advantage over someone who stays in one place because he was like the first player to win finals MVP with two different teams, or the second. And so in that regard, it depends case by case. And if we're going to talk about Kawhi Leonard, then the next thing we got to talk about on our list of news items is the recent investigation being opened up again by the NBA, investigating the Los Angeles Clippers and more specifically former employee Jerry West. The allegations outline that Jerry West paid a family friend of Kawhi Leonard's $2.5 million to try and get to basically pitch Kawhi to come to the Clippers, come to LA. And this is being steadfastly refused by the Clippers organization, but it's definitely an interesting thing because it goes on to continues this theme of recruitment and going and tampering, all the things that have happened, and how it's hard for the NBA to stop and keep track of. And it's a thing that teams can kind of get away with doing right now.
Yeah, it almost seems like the NBA can't actually punish you for doing it. They can just punish you for being sloppy and not covering your tracks well enough when you do it. I don't really believe that all the teams aren't doing this. I don't believe that the day they're allowed to hear offers is the first day they hear offers. So it's almost like, how much do you want to punish the guy in the team for doing something that almost every team is probably doing? And maybe part of that question is, how much of an impact did it actually have? I kind of understood Kawhi's decision to go to the Clippers as Kawhi's decision to go to the Clippers. The idea that he went because his friend pitched it, and his friend pitched it in some... If it was so easy as all you had to do was give a family friend like $2.5 million and then you could bank on that superstar coming, like the league would look a lot differently than it does. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like a huge deal to me.
Yeah, I agree completely. He was going to go there. It was where his family was. It was warm weather. We saw the Jimmy Kimmel interview last night where he said he couldn't find winter gloves to fit his massive hands. And then, it was the right decision. He could have gone to the Lakers, but both ways, I think he had his eyes set on LA. So I really don't understand if this rumor is true. I just don't understand why. It's not worth it. You don't need to spend that much money if he was already considering you. Yeah. All right. Let's move on to the preseason. We are just 4 days away from the beginning of the NBA regular season. And I wanted to talk about a couple of the key takeaways I had from this week's preseason games. The very first of which, Max, I want to get your reaction as I share my screen right here for you. Take a load of this fella, an absolute beauty,
Wow.
who has obviously spent a lot of time at nightclubs in Vegas and Houston, leading towards his rejoining the Houston Rockets. And of course, I'm referring to James Harden for those of you who do not watch on YouTube and consume on the podcast stream.
We are looking at a pretty filled out boy.
He is definitely chonk. And that didn't matter because he walked right in, put up 20 points, 9 assists, 7 rebounds. And obviously this seems a little bit exaggerated with the girth and the amount of weight he was carrying. But James Harden has kind of always been that way. He's a little bit stocky and he's super durable and just has this body designed to take physical punishment and still able to be pretty quick and tight with the handle and shoot from anywhere. So it was just funny to see the memes on Twitter when that happened, when he arrived back in Houston.
I mean, in hockey, you've got your Phil Kessel. In mixed martial arts, you've got your Daniel Cormier. There's always going to be guys who just, you look at their body and you're like, no way. And then you look what they do and you're just like, how? I know I've played beer league with a couple of guys on the ice who just don't look like they couldn't run halfway around the block, and then they proceed to skate circles 3 times around everyone. So yeah, as long as the numbers look good, then Harden looks good.
Yeah, and I think the same rule would
Get your
apply
strip club hot dogs, boy.
I think the same rule would apply to Zion in this situation as well. He's a big boy. Then the other news about Houston itself is that apparently Rockets management is opening themselves up to more teams and more conversations about moving Harden. I just don't see any team that offers a great enough amount of assets in order to acquire him. So I think he's going to end up staying in Houston unless Philadelphia comes up with a Ben Simmons centered deal. We've talked about that many times already before on the podcast. We can move on.
I think this year it's either he stays, and it's not this year he's going to be traded. It's going to be next year and for less than the Rockets are asking.
Yeah. All right. Next up, it was absolutely wonderful to see Steph Curry back on the basketball court in the preseason. This year with Clay going down, he's going to have a massive workload and a lot of pressure on him to produce offensively. And so far in the 2 games against the Sacramento Kings, he's looked just like plain old Steph. He's coming off screens, absolutely torching teams. He's tricky in the lane with some of the finishes. He moves the ball well based off of his gravity as guys come out to stop him on the perimeter, and he dumps it inside to the big man for a slam. So nice to see Steph doing what he's doing. He had 28 and 29, both in 28 minutes against the Kings. And I think this Warriors team is going to need a high level of production for him. So he could be a potential dark horse MVP candidate moving into this regular season, something to look out for. Another West Coast team, the Los Angeles Lakers, of course. There's been a lot of buzz around their young player, Talen Horton-Tucker, who had some great performances in their 2 games against the Clippers earlier in the preseason. And just overall theme for the Lakers is they look really deep. Schroeder's been playing well. Harrell has done great things for them. Gasol is a wonderful pickup for his ball movement and all the other reasons we talked about. And then this Talen Horton-Tucker kid might make Kuzma obsolete and definitely expendable because he has played pretty decent defense. He has the longest wingspan and is the heaviest player for his size at 6'4". So he's just got a great body for defense. And on the offensive end, he's a flamethrower and he's still developing that playmaking, but he's definitely a guy who could come off the bench and give you some great 2-way presence, which is just continuing to build that whole defense turns into half-court grind-you-out offense that the Lakers have done so well. And it just only serves to make them an even greater favorite moving into this season. And finally, the last takeaway I have is I don't know what their ceiling is, but as a Raptors fan, we've watched the 2 preseason games against the Charlotte Hornets, and then they played against Orlando last night. And I got to say that this Charlotte team, it may not be a high-level playoff team, but there's a mojo you can already start to feel with this team, like just the way that they have quite a few guys who can score the ball, pass the ball. They've got a lot of young, athletic wings and bigs who do great things. PJ Washington, Mikal Bridges, Malik Monk's still there, and like LaMelo Ball showed out in the most recent game. And Terry Rozier has looked great, and Devontae Graham is going to always light it up. It sucks that they've lost Gordon Hayward with the avulsion fracture in his hand. He cannot seem to stay healthy, which is a huge bummer, but it will just give some of these younger guys more opportunity to show out. And like every time LaMelo made a bucket, one of these players made a huge play defensively, offensively, their whole bench is up, dancing, clapping, they're excited. So I think this has some 2019 Nets vibes when D'Angelo Russell was leading that team full of kind of misfit toys, and this is kind of what Charlotte feels like with a little bit more talent. So I think they definitely could be contending for one of those play-in spots moving forward into this season.
Interesting. You'd almost expect you expect great basketball culture from the team owned by Jordan. So
yeah, well, I don't know what kind of culture there would be, but it seems this culture that they're developing seems pretty fun and less of like the Jordan strict, okay, I'm going to just push you to your absolute limit and like everything is super serious. These guys seem to be having a little bit more fun, and that might fit their culture a little bit more based on these players' personalities. Yeah. All right. Last thing I got to say is just touching on my draft update. This one's going to be really quick. Jalen Johnson of Duke out indefinitely with a foot injury. That sucks because he's a top 10 prospect that you would have liked to see play more games, and they already said they were not playing out of conference opponents, so we're really going to miss out on watching him play this season, which is a bummer for college fans and for anyone interested in the upcoming draft. And then we got to go back to my boy Cade, because Oklahoma State finally had their first loss of the season to TCU Horned Frogs. He had a chance to win the game again at the buzzer, and it was just one of those moments where you could see he was hero ball, and he got double teamed, and he forced up a shot at the buzzer, and so just a tough look there. He had 18 and 8 for the game, which is pretty solid, but just it's, again, this is something where he's going to get put through the grinder this season, as he's not playing on a super high level team, and so all of his games will be close. So it'll be good to see him kind of have some of these adversity moments to work through coming forward.
All right, then, as we've kind of mentioned, the NBA season is right around the corner. So our Monday episode is going to be dedicated to a preview of the season. Let's preview the preview. We're going to try and make some picks and make our guesses on the season. What things interest you to discuss or preview?
So how it's going to work is we're going to kind of throw out our playoff teams, and because of the play-in tournament this year, we'll be ranking our top 10 teams in each conference for the regular season. And then we'll also have some award picks in there, and then we'll take a look at projecting who we think is going to make it to the finals, and there might be a little bit more Raptors-centric look in this preview. But yeah, it should be a pretty thorough analysis of who we think is going to make the playoffs, who's going to go deep in the playoffs, and what the key contributors will be during the season.
All right. Looking forward to, I'll be doing my homework come Sunday, Monday morning maybe. Hopefully not Monday morning.
Yeah.
And looking forward to hearing your picks for that.
And maybe we get to do it in person. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see how we figure that out on Monday. Last thing before we go, I just wanted to shout out Henrik Lundqvist, who will be missing the upcoming NHL season with a heart condition. He's been an incredible goaltender for many years, and we wish him all the best in his recovery, and hopefully we can see him back out on the ice for one more season next year. So on that note, thank you everyone for listening. We appreciate you. We look forward to talking to you guys on Monday.
Sports Next Door signing out.